Okay. This is good afternoon. It is 1:06 p.m. on August 10th, 2020. My name is Don Gosney, and I welcome everyone to the meeting of the West Contra Costa Unified Schools Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Will you all join me in saluting the flag of our nation? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All members of the public are welcome to speak on any issue today that is on the agenda. Please use the tool to raise your hand and I will call on you at the appropriate time. We also have an opportunity under public forum to speak on any issue under the control of the CBOC that is not on the agenda. We request public comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Under public comment, with limited exceptions, the CBOC is not allowed to reply to comments or questions. Because this is an online meeting, I ask if anyone other than staff wants to speak, they use raise your hand feature and wait to be called on. Please do not talk over each other. We have several people here that are on telephone, so one way or the other, you just need to get my attention, please, if you need to speak. Remember to unmute yourself when you want to speak and then mute yourself when you're done. Just a reminder to please silence all phones not being used for this meeting, shoo away the dogs and maybe the little kitties and partners that might interrupt your meeting. And don't forget to smile so all of your adoring fans across the world can see how happy you are to be here.
I'm a little bit confused. Are we supposed to stay muted or unmuted?
Well, sometimes it's a good idea to stay unmuted until you're ready to speak. That way, if the phone rings or something comes up or you say something under your breath, it's not public. But
okay, so you want us to stay muted until we...
It'd be a good idea. Okay. Give me a moment, shuffling through papers here. Okay, Matt, can we go ahead with the roll call, please?
Sure. John Anderson.
Here.
Ken Burns is absent. Maisha Cole.
Maisha called in, said she's got a family emergency.
Yeah, I saw that. Sally DeWitt.
I'm here.
Lupe Inyana.
Here.
Don Gosney.
I'm here.
Lorraine Humes.
Here.
Anton Newhair.
Here.
And Mac Moore is also here. So we have 7 members present and a quorum.
Okay, that's always a good step. Okay. We have the approval of the agenda. Are there any requests to taking something out of order? All right, if hearing none, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda as presented. Do we have any public comments? Nothing?
I see no public comments.
Okay. All right, then we'll go ahead and turn things over to staff, start giving us some of their status reports and financial reports, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So welcome again. And thank you for moving the meeting earlier today to accommodate us for an afternoon meeting with the superintendent and the
I'm sorry, Louis, what is your drop dead time? You've got to be out of here.
2 o'clock.
Okay. You hear that, everybody? Go ahead.
Okay, so with the bond project status update, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk down this list and give you an update on the projects, and then we'll go into the photos and then answer any questions, and I'll give you a brief description of what's going on. So Michelle Obama, as you know, we're under construction, trying to wrap this project up. Some of the hurdles we have in front of us, we still have no power from PG&E, although they've been working diligently getting a new pole set on the street for PG&E. We've completed our work on site. We're actually waiting on their schedule now to install the primary feeders into the transformer and heat that up. Once that's done, we have several weeks left. Outside of that, to begin commissioning the schools, we'll need to start bringing up all electrical systems, HVAC, you name it, all the technology, so we can get those all brought online. One of the other hurdles that we're waiting on utilities is East Bay Mud. So East Bay Mud has been working in the street, bringing in new fire hydrant water lines. as well as connecting our domestic. We are still without. Hopefully that's going to happen within the next couple of weeks. We'll actually have water on site. We are still anticipating a target date of September, end of September, as far as when the site will be capable of being occupied, even though we're returning distance learning to the site. As everybody knows, next week on the 17th, school opens, and staff will be returning to the temporary campus in El Cerrito until such time as we can move them into the new campus. So the urgency behind that is not so pressing for staff as it is that we're trying to move the contract along and get to completion. We anticipate total completion of the playfields and the campus itself. It's still scheduled for mid-October for that to happen. Richmond High Critical Needs Project, we were successful in actually completing the work in the science building. The seismic retrofit work has been completed. We had some additional work, which was new flooring on the second floor, which was due to the condition of the flooring. That was a change order work that was done. Our staff is waxing the floors this week. I believe we have furniture moving back in on Thursday. And this one's important to us because teachers do have the opportunity to return to the classroom and do instructional teaching without students. That'll be their, instead of working from home, they can actually work from their classroom. And so these classrooms have windows, easily ventilated. So we'll probably see some teachers returning to these spaces to utilize them this fall. Moving on to the gymnasium portion of the work. The gym is under construction and it is on schedule, and that target date for completion is February of 2021. The sideline project we have, which is the health center building. So we are set to issue that work to our DB contractor as far as the grading, paving work, where we're going to put the new health center buildings. That is actually we'll be using project contingency for that, and we'll be going back to the board to actually amend their contract to include that additional cost. And we discussed this many months ago. That was never our intent to tear down the health building that was existed on site, but because of being non-DSA approved and the age of the buildings, it made more sense to replace the buildings. So the method for that is we procured the buildings. We'll be adding the cost to prep the site to the contract, and that'll be funded from dollars outside of the bond program because it was not directly related to the critical needs project, but it makes more sense to do it underneath the current contract without having to go back out for a second bid. Fairmont critical needs work is wrapping up, so the flooring replacement is now just about complete. We actually moved contents back in the classroom last Friday. The last floor that remained to be done was the multipurpose building. They worked over the weekend on that, and I'm assuming that they'll complete up Monday or Tuesday in preparation for having that building turned back over. The work that remains is still the fire alarm. Contractor has been working diligently trying to get the fire alarm systems installed in that building. And that work is coming to completion, and then we're looking for testing of those devices so we can start to wrap up this project by the end of the month. The Korematsu Fall Protection Project, this is a project, and I believe we talked about it before, is that we believed we were going to do the work underneath the previous DSA application. As we learned, we could not. So we are in line with DSA right now for submittal. We're going back to DSA on the 28th of this month. We're hoping for about a 6-week review period. Once those plans come out, we'll be able to start the contract on this. But currently that project is on hold until we have DSA approval to move forward.
Excuse me, Louis, do we need
Yes.
DSA approval even to secure a contractor?
Well, our contractor's already secured, so
Okay.
we went to bid on this and we secured the contractor. It was the nuance with DSA allowing us to what they call open the box or open the permit to start the work. And when we tried to do that, they said, you know, it's been so long, you have to come back and resubmit the project underneath the new project scope. And so that's kind of, we've got caught in that loop. We're in the process right now. So as soon as we have our permit in hand, we'll move forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Pinole Valley High field and bleacher restoration. So we're currently still in DSA on the last phase of that is the bleachers. As soon as we have DSA approval, we'll be going out to bid and hopefully be able to get that work kicked off later this fall. We're hoping that, either the end of this month, early September, we should be coming out of DSA with the bleachers. We'll finalize the packets and get this thing out to bid, hopefully by the 1st of October. Riverside's critical needs.
Sorry, Louis.
We've received.
Louis,
Yes.
back on Pinole Valley High School, please. I swung by
Yes.
there a couple of days ago to take pictures of the solar panels. I noticed that they're all fenced off and there's still wires dangling down. So I'm guessing that the solar panels are not completed. And if they're not completed, when can we expect them to be online?
So they're working to get that completed. So, their completion date was tied to the start of school, which is supposed to be this week. So I believe, and I have to go back and check Don, but I think we have actually shutdown coming up with PG&E. I believe it's this coming weekend. In order to actually energize the panel, we have a new breaker we have to put in to do that work. And then we'll just be in line with PG&E to actually come online with the solar system itself. This week, the work out there, the work going on site there is actually, there used to be some landscaping underneath the solar panels, but because of the lack of sunshine, that greenery will go away, and we're putting permeable concrete in to fill in those spaces in between the parking rows. It's a small, narrow area. It had some green grass in it, but it will be a hardscape surface now. So that work has started today. Back to Riverside. So the RFQ has come in. We've evaluated it. We're just finalizing the RFP, and that's going to go out this week, be issued, and it'll be out for about a month for review, and then come back with full submission for the DB. And we'll move that contract forward as soon as we get the proposals back in. E-rate year 23 is still on hold. And
Sorry, John Henderson has a question.
Yeah, at Riverside, what is involved in the soil stabilization process there? What are they doing?
So it's going to be either a soil mixing or a soil grouting. Basically, it's liquefaction is what we have, and we have liquefaction along the creek bed that extends into the site. And so basically, we'll be building a barrier, if you will, between the creek and the liquefaction around the building to stabilize the building.
It's a barrier more than solidifying the soils under. That's enough.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, if you have more particulars, and you can talk to me offline, and I can give you some more information on that. But it's a design build project, John. So we had the parameters from our soils engineer, but it is a selection method that we've left 3 different options to the contractor to determine the best method based upon their technology and their abilities. This project will both be.
I'll give you a call on that. I also, for my own edification, I'm interested in what the issues were at Obama School. But we can talk about that offline. Thanks a lot.
All right. No problem. So Lake Elementary, we're still underneath the bridging document, working on the bridging documents with our architect. We received a preliminary set of, I don't want to call them drawings, but layouts of what the buildings may look like as we move forward through the bridging component of that. Again, we're hoping to wrap this up in about another month. We're getting to the point where we're about ready to review some of these documents and estimates internally. And then we'll have further discussion on it with cabinet, and we'll be moving these things along. And then Stage critical needs. This project has been on hold, and we're about ready to pick this one up and start moving that scope of work forward, which was the demolition of one of the main primary education buildings and relocation of some of the portable buildings. Next slide, please. So Michelle Obama, so this is some of the work happening around the site. So you can see repaving the bus drop off on 42nd Street. Continue to work on one of the retaining walls out in front of the school. There's several retaining walls around this campus. This is one of the largest. While you wouldn't think that the site has a lot of grade changes, it's actually quite a sloping site as it runs along 42nd and 41st Street. Next slide. Here's just some of the interior spaces that you see they're moving towards completion. This is an example of some of the flooring in the classroom. These are actually plus and minus signs, I was told by the architect. And when you think of it in that light, you can actually see it. So just educational thought behind some of the inlays and the flooring. And then on the right-hand side is the wood flooring for the stage is going in. It's completed now. Next slide. Richmond High, this is standing at the east end of the science building looking towards the new gymnasium. And this is the plaza area that will open up. It'll have a series of biodetention planter beds. They're raised because of the site topography and the ability to get to the storm system. This portion of Richmond has very shallow storm drains, storm system, so it's very hard to get water from the site actually off-site. And there'll be a picture later of the actual lift stations we're putting in. But you can see that looking at the gymnasium, so the highest building obviously is the gymnasium, and on the left-hand side of that is all the locker rooms, weight room, dance room, component of the gym. Be a very nice finish for this for Richmond High. Next slide. And again, just some close-ups of the work around the gymnasium, and what you see now going in are some retaining walls that are being built. There's quite an elevation change between the back end of the gymnasium and what is the current stadium. It's about a 4-foot elevation, so this will actually be a ramp that'll take you down behind the new gymnasium and then give you access back up to the stadium area. Next slide. And again, just looking from the inside, you can see, on the left-hand side, we're actually on the roof of the locker room area. You can see the high-story windows that are going in, and you see that again in the left-hand or the right-hand photo. You can see the high bay windows that will be going into that space. Next slide. In the science building itself, so this is just preparation of the upper floor, and that, as I said, the flooring is now complete. Some of the other finishes we did in there were painting all the walls, replace all the ceiling tiles. We will be going back with some new technology as far as overhead projectors, things like that. So what you see, that pole is dropping down from the middle of the ceiling there, is actually a mount for the overhead projectors. And then on the exterior of the building, it gets a facelift with a new paint job. And so we've changed the colors up on this building, make it stand out. It actually looks really nice now that it's finally painted. It used to be pretty much all stark white with just some red accent stripes. We've added some tan colors to this building and some grays, and it really helps it stand out. Next slide. Our new gas meter that we had been waiting on PG&E is finally complete. We actually did the startup this morning, turned back on the gas, and we're able to light all of our gas-fired appliances on site. This gas meter used to be directly behind the old gymnasium that was torn down, and it ended up being dropped right in the center of the plaza we just viewed. And it was just going to be in a bad location, and this would have been the focal point. So we relocated the gas service to the outer edge of the property up in Maricopa. Those on the right-hand side, those large cylinders you see in the ground, those are actually the lift station. As I was describing earlier, our stormwater management system, the water has to be filtered before it can be discharged out to the public right-of-way. So the water from the roofs and the site will drain into these lift stations. The lift stations will actually pump the water up into the planter beds. It'll be a biodetention filtration system. The water will then drain back down and then be able to be discharged out into the city right-of-way. So one of the things that was not necessarily anticipated, but because of grades and shallow storm system, you would normally not have to do this type of lift station, but it is one of the constraints of the site. So next slide. So Fairmont, here's just a look of what the new flooring looks like within the corridors and the classroom. This is a non-wax product. It's a luxury vinyl flooring, very nice product. It is part of our new material standards. So it's very nice within the classrooms. Next slide. And here's our monthly newsletters that go out. Next slide. The newsletter for Richmond High. And then just our project status reports for Fairmont. Next slide. Wilson, and then Richmond High. Next slide. Okay, so go back one, Julio. I think at this point, we'll just take any questions you may have on the project status update. If none, then we can move on to the financial reports.
Melissa, before you start, just so everybody knows, Melissa and Louis both have to leave in right about a half an hour. We've got a tremendous amount of things for them to take care of in that short period of time. So unless there are any questions about the financial reports, or Melissa thinks that one has to be brought up, I'm just going to bypass those for right now and get on to the updates that I asked them to provide, items number G and H. Would that work for everybody?
Don, can I make a quick, 30-second note about the financial reports? Because this particular month, there's something that's a little bit unusual.
Absolutely.
But I'll make it very brief. So Julio, if you can jump to page 32. So we're in the middle of the year-end close. Our fiscal year closes on June 30. And so typically June services would show up in July as expended in July. But due to our year-end, all services completed by June 30 must be booked in June. So one of the things you'll notice here on our report 2 across the expenditures is you'll see the majority of the expenditures reported on this month take place in June. So this will happen essentially every year when we close the books, where June is basically double the amount of expenditure, and then the July expenditures are very small because the July expenditures just reflect services performed in July. Typically we see billings for services the month after, and so I just really wanted to call that to everyone's attention because that might be unusual when you're looking at the report, for example, on the variance, and then in particular on this report. So these are our financial reports based on a preliminary closing, and we look to finish up our close next month, and so there might still be just a couple of adjustments. But that's the main difference between this particular month's reporting and what you're used to seeing.
Thank you, Melissa. Julio, we have 4 participants here from the public, and they're listed as attendees. Unfortunately, the way we're set up, I can't, if they've got a question, they have no way of raising their hand. Can you do something maybe to switch them to panelists so that if they do have a question or comment, that I can see them raise their hand and address that?
Yes, I can switch them to panelists right now.
Thank you very much. Okay, then I'm going to turn things back over to Louis and Melissa for items G and H.
Okay, so the request was to give an update on the critical needs projects that the budget authorization was taken to the board on the 29th and approved for $103 million. And so I can walk you through each one of these projects. It's both been reviewed at the facility subcommittee as well as the full board during the master plan update. And just a comment that while these were the $103 million was put on as a consent item, we do agree that next time it'll go forward as an action item, although they've been done as consent items in the past. But there was a full project review for the board of each project and the dollars that are associated with each one of those critical needs projects during the presentation portion to the board. So with that, we'll move forward. Next slide. So Kennedy High School. So the Kennedy High School project, as seen within the critical needs project, is a seismic value, or seismic, I can't say retrofit because it's not a retrofit, it's actually demolition of the classroom building known as the 100 and 200 classroom wing that fronts Cutting Boulevard. Its scope was to relocate those students into the portables, which the portables are currently occupied by the Caliber Charter School. And then it was a relocation of the main office into the 500 wing. So the question is, what's the scope? Well, this is the scope that's laid out within the master plan. Our process is we needed to have the budget approved for us to move to the next phase. And the next phase is the assessment. Is this the right scope? And with that, then beginning to lay out a plan. There was questions, do we have a plan? Well, the plan's not fully developed. We have the scope that leads us to the plan, but that's why we need the budget in order to move that one forward. So the issues with the classroom building itself are mostly seismic related. There are shear wall issues with that building, as well as seismic connection components between the floors and walls. Much like other seismic projects that we've done, which Richmond High Science Building is an example, and the Crespi Gymnasium is an example. All those were connection problems between the tilt-up panels, the flooring system, and the roofing system that required the retrofit action. Because of the length of this building and the narrow, I'm not a structural engineer, but there is more complexity because of the amount of shear walls that have to go in this building from floor to roof in order to stabilize the building in the event of an earthquake. And that's why the original project scope was deemed to be a replacement of the building, along with some of the other just environmental concerns with the classroom building. And then when I say environmental concerns, we're talking lack of windows in the classroom, HVAC systems that are aging out in this building. They're independent to each room. And then just the overall condition of the building and its age. Next slide. So these are some photos that have been added to the presentation. So this just to give you an idea of what the classroom building really looks like. Typically, they're one class, this building, it's a long building. Each of these classrooms are basically, the building is one classroom deep. If you were to walk up on the left-hand side, which would be the actual classrooms. And again, you can see there's no windows in these buildings at all, no way to get external light. You'll hear from some teaching staff that they go in the morning when it's dark and they leave when it's dark in the afternoon and never get a chance to see daylight except for maybe at lunch. So it does have, issues with the learning environment as well. So next slide. And again, this is just an overview of the campus and a bigger blow up, defining what is the front building, where it's located and its adjacencies. And what's behind the main building is really one with the bright, I guess it's white or gray roof, if you will, was a science building that was retrofitted about 8 years ago and brought back up. And then on the right-hand side of that is basically the library building that sits next to it. And that's what's directly behind the administrative and classroom building. And then at the lower end of the campus, you can see where the portable campus has been built. This was originally a transition campus for the Coronado School, and then later additions have been added to it for the Caliber Charter School. And as anticipated right now, this would be the eventual home for the Kennedy academic classrooms until such time that there's money or prioritized, Kennedy would get a rebuild. Next slide. And again, these are some photos of what the Caliber campus looks like currently today. Next slide. So Hercules Middle High School, the scope of this work is about a $14.7 million project. It was originally broke up into two parts. One represented the middle school and one represented the high school. But the true scope of this work was really to build a science, if you want to call it science wing, science building that would accommodate both campuses that could be shared. Lab space, classroom space would be independent to each one of the schools, but lab space could be shared between the two. The current condition of the science rooms in this campus, they were under-designed to begin with, and this would be a modern science program to the Hercules campus. Next slide, please. So Shannon Elementary, so $7.1 million. Shannon has always operated their multipurpose room, which happens to be a portable building. It's very small on the inside, has virtually no real kitchen to it at all. The food in elementary is typically brought in and reheat. It has no stage, very small, outdated, portable, past its useful life. This would be the construction of a new multi-purpose building for the campus. Next slide. Collins Elementary, the scope of the Collins Elementary project. This building operates on 3 different boiler systems, one for each wing. The boilers are outdated. It's already in radiant heat. So what that means is heat through the floor. So pipes run throughout the flooring in this building. So the water flows through the pipes in the floor, heats the building. Over the years, though, there have been multiple breaks within the piping within the flooring system. And when that happens, it requires opening up the floor to find the pipe, repair the pipe, and pour it back. So this system is just really outside its useful life. In addition, it's in a portion of the town that gets very hot. So the scope would be to replace the boilers with an updated heating and cooling system for this campus. While there's a modest stage in the multipurpose room, it's a portable stage that was built many, many years ago. It's not accessible. We would be removing that stage and putting something that would be more appropriate for the size of the multipurpose room and accessible for the campus. So, next slide. Cameron School. So Cameron School was one of the projects that did not have a defined scope. So when the master plan was approved in 2016, they couldn't determine what the final scope would be during the board discussion. The final outcome was to set the budget at $1.3 million, but come back at the time when the critical needs project would move forward, determine what those critical items would be within budget, and move that project forward. So this has a whole scoping component that needs to be done for this campus. Next slide. And that was just a quick overview, but if there are particular questions, we'll try to address them at this time.
Anybody have anything at this time? I know I still have a lot of questions, but I mentioned to Lewis, he and I talked offline because of his pressing needs to get out of here and go to his other meeting. So some of those will have to be dealt with offline, and we'll come back in particular on Lake Elementary School so you can give us a little bit more details about just where that $64 million is going to go. But if we have no other questions at this time, we'll just turn things over to Melissa so you can tell us about the upgrades to the FMP.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Julio, can you go ahead and jump to slide 66? This is the presentation that was presented to the Facilities Committee, and so and then with minor changes also presented at the board meeting on the 29th. And so I'd like to start us here because I think this is the intent of the update today. So in presenting how to update the facilities master plan, we thought it was absolutely critical that we look at the review of the 2016 facilities master plan, which actually began in July of 2015. So the facilities master plan was created in active consultation with the committee to really set the course adaptable over time. And the projects that Lewis just shared with you, those 5, those were all part of that plan that was approved back in June of 2016. So the facilities master plan itself is available on the website for anybody that would like to learn more about the process, and you can see the web link is identified there. The 3 bubbles that you see in the center, those are really the driving philosophies of our team and things that we look at and really try to take a conscious effort to in everything that we do. But I really want to focus on the last 3 items on this slide, slide 67. These were the end goals of the facilities master plan back in 2016, and they really sought to do 3 things. The first one was to identify the order in which projects on the priority sites would be completed based on equitable and measurable criteria. Then once that was complete, then define the construction projects with, and then lastly, establish the implementation plan that prioritizes the clear course of action to address the facility's needs. Next slide. And I apologize, I have slow internet connection, so hopefully I'll be able to keep up with you. This is a summary of some of the, basically a majority of the steps that were completed back in 2015 and 2016, which included over 87 public meetings to gather input that ultimately led to the development of the master plan. Next slide. And one of the key committees that was formed back in 2015 was the Prioritization Committee. And so the purpose of the Prioritization Committee was to consider and recommend the criteria for project sequencing to the board. The committee at that time was comprised of 15 members, which you can see identified there. Next slide. And so in going back and looking at the facilities master plan document, you can see that what the prioritization committee really did was they considered 25 criteria that were really generated site and district-wide. And this criteria came from things like the district-wide survey that was issued, meetings that were held at each one of the priority school sites. And so then this prioritization committee, which reflected the full district, looked at those criteria. They added, they split, combined, and narrowed, and ultimately developed the 12 criteria that you see here before you that ultimately went to the board for review and approval, and then was approved unanimously. Next slide. And I apologize, I'm just a little delayed. And so looking at where we've been and what the success we believe of that process was, we really want to use that to inform our process moving forward. And so Measure R was approved back in March. And so Measure R really spoke to the construction, repair, and renovation of the priority school sites, which you can see are on the left-hand side of the slide, with Wilson at the time, now Michelle Obama School, and Lake Elementary below the line, because the campus replacement for those sites is included in the 2016 Facilities Master Plan. Measure R also spoke to some district-wide improvements to help control classroom climate, technology, safety. Next slide. Sorry, I'm slightly delayed. And so here is the summary in a bubble diagram of really how we see the process moving forward. One of the things that you may note is in the top left hand, you can see we have an additional bubble. And that's really the lens of equity. And this is something that we've talked about extensively with the facilities committee about in moving forward with updating the facilities master plan and incorporating Measure R, moving forward with a lens of equity in the work that we do. Next slide. And so with those driving philosophies, what we presented to facilities committee are the slides as you see them here before you. What I would like to do right after this meeting, and it actually might be this evening because we've got to get to our next meeting, is I'd like to share the slides that we actually presented to the board on July 29th, because we learned at the facilities committee, we heard some questions that we thought were right on, and we wanted to be more deliberate and transparent in what we presented to the board. And so this slide, when we presented to the board, which is really our recommendation to reform the prioritization committee and to really expand that committee, which was originally 15, to a larger composition. We added to the slide what we really think the prioritization committee roles and responsibilities are, because that's one of the key questions we heard at the facilities committee. What is the role of this committee? What are we asking them to do? And so the proposed composition represents a parent from each one of the high school families based on feeder patterns, student representative from each one of the families, 3 representatives of district staff representing academic, special education, and then the business and operations office. Then we've also added representatives from key committees throughout the district. You can see the MDAC, the LCAP, ASAT, and CBOC. And then in purple, you see those are our labor partners. So one of the other answers that we'd like to share today, based on some questions that we received, is really the role of this committee is to look at the existing criteria and make recommendations on additional criteria that may need to be considered. And then in addition to identifying the criteria, there's also the weighting of the criteria. Both of these are key components, and ultimately it would be this committee's recommendation as to what the criteria should be and what the weighting would be that would ultimately go to the board for the board's approval. So one of the questions that we've heard is, how do we compose the committee? How do we form the committee? And so staff's recommendation would be that for each one of the schools, we would reach out to the principal in advance of the back to school nights, which have been scheduled early on this year. We don't want this to compete with the opening of schools. We know that that is a huge priority right now, but we also want to take advantage of the planned back to school night. So we would be asking the principals to reach out to their families to let them know about this opportunity for anyone who might want to apply to participate in the committee. We talked about adding to that committee, which that basically application, a clear indication of what the role of this would be and what is the realistic time frame, duration, and time commitments that we would be asking of the committee members so that they would better understand really what that they would be signing up for. And so we would receive applications from our school sites. And so that's basically your top two lines. And then from the lines below that, our blues and our purples, what we would be asking each committee, department, or labor partner to do is to basically make a nomination of who they would like to nominate to be the representative on the prioritization committee. So what we're working on now is really putting together that application and then identifying the outreach so that we can complete that most likely next week in advance of school opening. Next slide. So one of the things that we looked at as staff, and one of the things that we would want to prepare in reaching out to the committee, is we need to have good data. I think the better your data, the better your decision making, right? The more you know, I think the better the resulting decision can be. And so to that end, there are some criteria from 2016 that we think the data could be easily and cost effectively updated to really reflect the 2020 data. So out of the 12 criteria, we had identified some here. This identifies on the left-hand side to you what the criteria was, and then you can see on the right-hand side what the metric was, because behind any metric, there must be objective criteria that is used for that criteria. Next slide. And so lastly, what we had presented at Facilities Committee and then updated slightly for the board was basically the next steps to prioritize and incorporate Measure R into the timeline. So when we presented this to the Facilities Committee, this was really just a snapshot of that initial master plan end goal, which is to identify. So if you'll recall back when we were on slide, and we don't have to go there, but I do think it's really helpful. Back on slide 67, it identified those end goals, and there are three, right? Identify, define, and establish. So what we shared at Facilities Committee were really the next steps in identifying the project. So this is just a snapshot of the process. Back in 2015-16, it was basically a one-year process to go from the beginning of the meetings all the way to the end. We think we can do a little bit better than a year this time, but we recognize to have a highly transparent and interactive process, it will take time. And so these steps that are laid out here before you are really to achieve that first master plan goal. And in the presentation I'll share later, which was the board presentation, it identified all of the steps which carried us through define and identify. So here in the next couple of months, here are the steps that we see before us. So the board did approve the budget authorizations for the final phase of the 2016 master plan. So we'll begin commencing work on those projects. Here in August, there's basically two key things that we're trying to do. One of them is we're developing a district-wide survey that we would like to issue to the entire district with a series of questions very similar to the one that was done back in 2015. And the results of those surveys ultimately would really be presented to the prioritization committee at their very first meeting, so they could have a pulse from the district about how to really move forward in this new process. And so we're looking at the questions that were asked back in 2015 and putting together that survey, and we'd like to bring the draft of that survey to our board at the Facilities Committee later this month to look at and really get that issued district-wide. The other thing is really the engagement process. So reaching out to all of our site leaders, reaching out to our committees and our partners so that we can develop the composition of the prioritization committee so that they could begin to meet. So then in September, very aggressively, we projected that we would be able to present the criteria for prioritization to the board. It's a hard thing to do, to be optimistic and to be aggressive in your scheduling and to meet all of our deadlines. But what we know is we have 3 board meetings in September, one of them being the joint meeting with this body. And so while we hope to meet this mark, if we don't have the full composition of the committee and the recommendation ready to move to the board in September, then it would go in October. But what we would have in September, at the very least, would definitely be an update on all of these activities and a couple of the meetings of the prioritization committee. So again, kind of going back to the role of the prioritization committee, their role is to really look at and make a recommendation on the equitable, measurable criteria and the weighting that then would be applied across all of the priority sites. And so that is something that ultimately will go to the board and that the board would need to approve. And then based on that criteria, there would then be a resulting sequencing of projects, which would also need to go to the board for approval based on this new approved prioritization criteria. Staff's role is really, facility staff role is really to continue to gather updated data that reflects 2020, so you can see kind of concurrent to this community engagement process where we would be a chair to that committee. We need to continue to update the metrics to reflect the 2020 data across the previous criteria that was used. We also need to conduct an HVAC study to really look at what are the systems we have and what are the needs that we have across some of our campuses that don't currently have the climate controlled air. So what would happen in the winter of 2020, which is not represented here on this slide, is really that next master plan end goal, which is the defining the construction projects. So based on the sequencing, there would be options that would be brought forward to the board. And then ultimately the board would make an approval of the sequencing and the project compositions. And then we would need to make sure that that would then incorporate and fold in technology, HVAC projects, as well as the focus on the priority schools. And that would lead to the options. And then the work that we see happening in the early spring of next year would be establishing the plan. And so presenting the implementation plan to the board is the plan that ultimately says, these are the projects, the scopes, and the budgets, and here's the sequence. Because one of the things that we know we have to look at in really presenting that plan is cash flow is a big indicator of how many projects we can do and when we can do them. And so there is a tremendous amount of work ahead of us, but we believe that our best work will be done in active consultation with the committee. And so our focus for this next quarter would be the survey and really the community engagement piece so that we can get back to the board with the recommendations to complete our first end goal of the master plan. And so with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa. I know we all have a lot of questions. I certainly do, but I can take care of mine offline. We've got only about 4 minutes left before Melissa and Lewis have to leave. We'll take Leslie first and then Mac.
Hello, good afternoon to everybody. I have 2 brief comments, and they are about committee composition. The first one is I am wondering if we can put PTA on that committee for the composition. We have over 3,200 members. We represent the full breadth and depth of diversity in the district. We have units everywhere from Verde to Kensington. We have 29 units, and I believe at least 8 will be touched by a remodel or a renovation. So I would ask that PTA look to be seated. The second is a school like the Mandarin School, which I believe is not zoned into Kennedy or El Cerrito. How would a parent from Mandarin School apply if they wanted to participate? Thank you.
Okay, Mac and then Sally. Mac? Last chance, Mac.
Sorry, I'm just trying to multitask and unmute. This is totally off topic, but I just wanted to go back to financial reports and ask about the status of the Pinole Valley State Grant, which was, I think, due to be released in the July timeframe. And do we have any further update?
Thank you so much for asking. So we did reach out to OPSC last month because we did expect to see it. The state typically works like clockwork, but they were experiencing a 4 to 8 week delay in processing. But we did just yesterday receive notification of the approved release. And so that's something that will go to the county first, and then it'll be transferred into our Fund 35. So we should be able to see those dollars move above the line in next month's report.
Excellent, good. That's good news.
All right, thank you. Sally, and if you guys are through talking, please lower your hands.
Okay, so 2 questions. Who is chairing the prioritization committee? The second question is it governed by the Brown Act? So does it have to have minutes? Is it posted? Is it agendized, etc.? And the third question is, you may have answered this, and I was listening as carefully as I could, but I still could not decipher whether or not by October you expect to have the FMP updated. Is that the with community input and so forth? I still don't understand that part, but anyway, I have the first 2 questions.
Melissa, do you want to respond to any of those?
Sure. So we do not expect to have the update of the master plan done by October of this year. We would expect the update of the facilities master plan and the incorporation of Measure R to be done early next calendar year. So it would be early 2021. But this is a massive process that kind of has those 3 key spaces within it. And so I think very similar to the bond program management plan, where we've brought monthly updates on where we are in the process, because the process is part of the narrative of updating the plan. Those updates will be coming forward to this body, but the completion of the plan isn't something that we see till 2021. The committee would be chaired by, the board did approve the Director of Facilities and Construction. That is a position that has essentially been vacant since Lewis became our Associate Superintendent. We haven't had an engineering officer or a Director of Facilities and Construction, but we're really happy the board approved our director nomination at the last board meeting, and so we hope to have the director starting ideally before the end of the month. And I think that person is a face that you'll be happy to see, and really kind of a wealth of wisdom that will come to this body and really help chair those efforts. I'll tell you that it's that person that told me that every time we touch a building, we have an opportunity to improve learning. And that's the consciousness that this person brings. And I think that they're going to be a huge asset to our group, and just continue to help support the resource that we need to keep up with the work that we have ahead of us. And so they would be the chair of the committee, not a representative on the committee, because our job in facilities is really to bring the most up-to-date data and to be the facilitator, but not the decision maker. And I hope that answered your question, Sally.
This person, is this somebody we would know? or is this somebody from outside?
So Ellen Mejia Hooper was the one that was recommended for the director position.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Hearing none.
Yes, 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 yes. Unmuted, unmuted. What was the name again?
Ellen Mejia Hooper.
Okay, and I don't think, thank you, Melissa, for answering the first question, but I don't know is this committee governed by the Brown Act? Are there minutes and postings and all that kind of stuff?
I don't believe so, but I think what we can do is we'll set up a page on our website similar to what we did with the bond management plan, so that we have a place where everyone can go to see the updates of the committee. But it doesn't have board representation, or at least it didn't back in 2015-16. It wasn't a Brown Act committee.
Okay.
All right. I thank you very much, and off to your next meeting.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, everybody. And Dawn, I'll send you the board presentation, plus I made an additional slide that helps kind of carve out the timeline to share with the CBOC.
I look forward to that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on with the rest of our meeting. And first, I want to apologize. The presentation slideshow, and there is something that I inserted in there. I did not know that that Melissa had updated it, as she said, because it was just a very short period of time. My mistake, and I apologize for that. But she will be forwarding the newer version of that, and hopefully we'll all be able to spot the differences. Okay. Do we have a report from our Board of Education liaison? No, we do not. All right.
Hey, Don, this is Julio. Do you still need me to share my screen?
If we do, we'll call you back.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. We've got the consent. Oh my goodness, I can see everybody's face now. Or at least some of you got really big. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the consent calendar items. We have, I believe, 3 items. If there's no reason to pull them off, we've got the adoption of the minutes, we have the information request log, and we have the approved recommendations by the CBOC. Okay, go ahead on to committee reports. That'd be membership. That's page 94 for those that are thumbing through it. Mac? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have no comment. I think that this is
okay. On that membership report, it was pointed out to me that at the very bottom of it, the reference to board member Tom Panis attending was past our 12-month period, and I had that plenty of time to make the change, and I didn't. Again, another apology. I will take care of that. Item number N, membership roster. And again, pointed out to me that I grabbed the wrong version. Still had Vanessa Hill's name on there. I even took care of it. I know I did. I apologize. If anybody's keeping track, I think that's the 3rd apology today. Okay. I think item O was the chairperson reports. I gave 3 different reports since our last meeting. I reported to the public through the board and the forum they provide the CBOC about how open and fair the district is when it comes to the bond program. I reminded them that everything we do is done publicly. At least our end is done publicly. So we want to make sure that anybody from the public has an opportunity to see what we do, how we do it, and as we're seeing here right now, I see Mark Porter, his wonderful face on there. We want to invite the public to attend our meetings and to participate as much as we can. All right. I also reminded the public that while the board approves applications to serve on the CBOC, they don't appoint CBOC members. With this being election season, a lot of issues are coming up that normally wouldn't come up, and a lot of misinformation is coming from some of the candidates. If they're coming from the candidates, that means that it's also in the general public as well. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that the erroneous information that is being disseminated is being corrected. You know, when people apply to be on the CBOC, it goes through a process to be reviewed. A recommendation is then made to the Board of Education, and then the board actually approves or denies the application, but they do not actually appoint somebody. It's not like a board member comes out and says, this is my representative. I also pointed out that the CBOC works for the public and not the board. The CBOC, we stand up for the community. We serve as their eyes, their ears, and their voices, because they can't all be here, or they don't want to be here. I also submitted another plea for a joint meeting at that time, which is being worked on right now. I sent emails to all the CBOC members. The proposed date is Wednesday, September 30th. I have heard back from a couple of you actually, which is good. I asked the superintendent whether he planned to have a start at 6 o'clock, 6:15, 6:30. No response as yet. One of the issues though that is important for us as we move forward is we've got to work on our communication. If I send out an email asking for feedback on something, like asking for whether the September 30th date is going to work for everybody, I need a response because I can't move forward till I hear back from everybody. If I ask for email addresses or phone numbers that we can make public so that since we're their representatives, that the public knows that who we are and how to get a hold of us. Again, I only received responses back from a few of you. When it came time to on a couple of other issues that just in the past couple of weeks, I'm just not hearing back. So please help me out by, if I send something, don't send it straight to the junk folder. Actually take a look at it and try to respond if you can, please. Okay, any questions on the chair reports? Okay, let's go to item P, which is the capital improvement, budget control, and effective bond oversight. This is a second reading of resolution 20-2 submitted by Anton and Sally. So I'll turn things over to them. We spent 67 minutes on this at our last meeting. We really don't need to spend another 67 minutes on this, do we? But I'll go ahead and turn things over so we can see where we are at. Anton and Sally.
Sorry, trying to unmute again. Okay, so let's go back up to the resolutions. Hopefully people have had a chance to look at the whereases. And so what we're resolving is that the first thing is the capital improvement budget should be prepared by the superintendent. And actually I would let Anton speak to that for the most part. And the second item is that the FMP, the FAI recommendation, the forensic accounting investigation, TC 2-1, has not been implemented in 2020, which is to have a quote, complete and comprehensive update of the facility master plan by 2020. And the board had, as you saw in one of the whereases, the board itself, the district itself back in 2016 defined what that would look like in effect. And then the third item resolution is that the Measure R ballot measure language cannot be used as a basis for effective bond oversight, and because it's too generalized. It's not specific enough, which is what Proposition 39 and a number of other best practice organizations, for example, the Hoover Commission and so forth, calls for, and VLS, the FAI, called for specificity in their recommendation TC 2-2. So we would be, this wording was put in place in 2019. There's no question that it's appropriate for the CBOC to take, to make a statement about this. And so that's the resolution. Anton, would you like to say anything about number 1?
Yes, thank you. The proposal here is that we have a funding plan to go along with the facilities master plan. We heard earlier today the presentation on the facility master plan, what the capital budget, and this is very common in government agencies where you have a 5-year capital budget And this shows you the funding by year of the facilities master plan. I think it makes sense. I support it.
The only other thing I would say about this is for those who haven't been with the CBOC for very long, so the new members, the third resolution pertains to the compliance statement that is made in the CBOC's annual report. And Lupe, I'm not sure if you were here the last time we approved the annual report.
I was, Sally.
Okay, so you were part of that discussion over whether or not we could make a statement and declare that we were in compliance, that the district was in compliance with the Prop 39 and the Ed Code requirements. So by making the statement that we're making in number 3, the third resolution, we're saying that going forward, we will also not be able to say that the district is in compliance, because the wording is very, very similar to measure the prior two measures, D and E. It's really no different in that regard. So they didn't get any more specific in measure R than they had been in D and E, and we couldn't therefore say that the money was spent on specific projects because it was not specific. So it's just business as usual in effect, and won't change in measure R from where it's been in D and E. And the VLS, the FAI, had said you need to change, but they didn't. So they didn't implement that particular recommendation.
All right, I'm going to take all these three as separate motions because they're independent of each other, and we don't necessarily want all three to go up or down if we disagree with one or agree with one. So
they aren't actually all independent, in that the first one mitigates some of the problem with the fact that they didn't implement those two recommendations. So the bringing in a capital improvement budget and saying, okay, so you didn't implement those two recommendations, so put in a budget, a capital improvement budget, and you've at least mitigated some of that problem. So they're not completely or strictly independent of each other.
all right. On item 1.
These are all best practices, all three of them. Yes, item 1.
On item 1, is there a motion to approve? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve it.
Is
I
there
move this second.
All right. Moved by Sally DeWitt, approved by Anton Younger. Is there any discussion on item number 1? Motion number 1. Mac?
Yeah, so folks may recall in the last meeting, I asked to table this item and asked the proponents to make some specific updates, essentially to, in regard to this item, provide a summary of the how this budget concept would work, i.e. get more specific, and to address any shortcomings in the existing planning process, the master planning process. And so to be honest, I'm rather disappointed that we didn't get any of that additional information, a critique of the existing planning documents and areas where they could be improved. And so I still would reiterate that I think that that's important, rather than to create something that's vague and make a recommendation that would be very difficult for the district to implement, even if they chose to, because there's no specifics here. I think that it would behoove us, if we do have this, is to come up with a much more specific recommendation detailing what is missing from the master plan in terms of its schedule, scope, budget, and how we might be able to incorporate that into the update of the plan, which is obviously right in front of us and full coming out over the next several months. So I would again, if we wanted to continue to discuss this item, I think we need to be much more specific, and because otherwise I think there's a very little chance it will be implemented, because on the receiving end of this recommendation, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. That's my comment. Thanks.
Now, I agree with Mac on this, that I'm concerned about the lack of specificity. I like on motions in particular. And if I'm the one that's going to be going to the board and saying, this is what the CBOC wants, so I can't answer any questions that they've given about the specifics of it, because they're not here and we're not voting on any specifics on there. This leans more towards a general concept than on a specific recommendation. And so, I'd much rather see this come back with specifics on there. Do we have any other comments? Anton?
I understood that Mac's comment was on item 1, the capital improvement budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so what you're asking for specifics. This is very specific. A capital improvement budget is very specific recommendation. You show the funding of the facility master plan by fiscal year. What could be more specific than that? So I cannot accept the fact that this is not a specific recommendation that can be implemented. It's very clear. Anyone who understands capital budget, there's much literature on capital budgets and governmental agencies. Capital budget would show the project and would show the fiscal year the money is budgeted to complete the project. It's based on the facility master plan. So this resolution does not attempt to add to what's the facility master plan. It has to do with a capital budget. It's a separate document that reflects the funding for the facilities master plan.
So my comment there is, I think that in my reading of the master plan and the updates that have been made over the past several years, that there is a cash flow forecast that's utilized. And so part 2 of my question, in it not being specific, was this aspect of why can't this be included as a part of the updated master planning process, where we could provide some specific recommendations of what we'd like to see in that process that would update or change, modify what they've been the past practice of the scheduling and budgeting that has been included in those updates.
Anton?
The issue here, Mac, is the fact that this capital budget is updated annually. Master plan is only updated every 3 to 4 to 5 years. So what the district does is every year, what I'm suggesting in July, after they adopt the general fund budget, they adopt a 5-year master plan project for the next 5 years. So the community, everybody knows what the funding is by project for the next 5 years. So that's a different purpose than the master plan. Clearly, it will reflect the master plan.
So, and I guess my view, and when you say that this is only updated every few years, that's correct in the context of this very large and comprehensive update that we're embarking on now. But each year there's been an update of the master plan, and in those presentations that I've seen to the board, there is a sort of, in my view, a lot of what you're asking for in terms of the project's, budget, the sequencing updates to the schedule, and also a cash flow. And so, again, I'm having a hard time seeing what is deficient in that process that we're trying to fix, to improve. I'm not saying that it is perfect, but what I'm saying is I don't want to create something separate. I want it to, if we can, to link this into that existing annual process of the update to the master plan, where we get that presentation. I think it's typically in May, and there's updates to schedules, updates to the cash flow, et cetera. So that's what I would like to see, a critique of that, those planning documents, and say, this is why we need this new planning document. So that's, I think, what Anton, that's what I think is missing in this discussion. And if I don't understand, I suspect that the district is not going to understand what we're trying to accomplish here. And so I think we should spend a little bit more time to work on this, and I think see if we can slot this into the context of the comprehensive update, that this should be a feature of that master plan going forward.
Okay, Sally,
Well, first, can I speak?
No, Sally had to hand up first.
Okay, well, so Mac, are you aware of a budget for a site, the individual sites in the master plan, which is a multi-year budget approved by the board?
Well, I think that the master plan essentially does that, because, so for example, when they approved this update, for the final 6 or 7 projects in the 2016, what they call the near-term implementation plan, that includes a schedule, i.e. the sequencing of the projects, when they are expected to occur, and then also the budgets for those projects. So that's, to me, that's essentially, that's a capital budget for those specific projects. We're kind of laying those out.
Okay, so my understanding is that there's a difference between a capital budget and a rough order of magnitude estimate, which is what I understood was in the facility master plan. So a rough order of magnitude estimate is just, every 5 years, this is roughly what that's going to cost. But that's not the same thing as a multi-year capital improvement budget that would be put into the capital budget. And I'm not at all aware of an actual multi-year capital budget. And I say that having been in a large organization, Chevron, budget analyst, and every year we had budgets for capital projects that were approved by the governing body in our organization and taken very seriously as an approved budget. And it was a multi-year budget. So it was multi-year, millions of dollars. And then in addition to that, every year we had an annual budget that said, well, out of that $104 million that we're going to spend on that project, we're going to spend 20 million of it this year. And so people would be tracking the annual budget, the $20 million, and how are they doing. They'd also be tracking, how they're doing on the 104 million, and whatever happened in the middle of the year that might affect the 104 million, then they would have to adjust that budget at some point in time. But that budget was taken very seriously and approved by the governing bodies. So I'm not seeing that same structure here in the district, and I'm wondering if you do see it. And what I'm thinking is that Anton's proposal here is putting that missing piece in there, that very important, capital budget that's multiple year. A rough order of magnitude estimate in the facility master plan does not suffice for an actual capital improvement budget for a project.
So,
Sorry, Anton had his hand up
oh,
before.
okay. So, thank you. Sorry.
I just want to make sure that Mac understands that this is not a cash flow. This is a budget. So there's a substantial difference between a cash flow and a budget.
Substantial.
Because a budget, of course, is on a accrual basis. That's why Melissa earlier said you're going to have all those expenditures in June, because that's the budget. But let me ask Mac this: would you be open to if we added some language to the effect that we would include the 5-year capital budget as part of the annual master plan update? That then would link this to the master plan, which I think you're suggesting. Would that amendment be useful?
I think that it could be useful, Anton, but what you and Sally are doing now is what I had hoped you would do in writing, in advance of this meeting, so we could consider it, to make the case of why we should impose this additional work on, our district. I think if you can make the case to me and others on the members of the committee that in fact this is a valuable piece, then I think we could consider it. But again, you're just now articulating a little bit on the fly and not in a very comprehensive manner, why we need this. So what I was hoping for in the, since, the past month, that you would have done that. And so what I'm asking for again is that perhaps we defer this until our next meeting, where you could, in written form, articulate the deficiencies and why this concept of a capital budget, the distinction between a cash flow, et cetera, all those things that you're doing now. If we had that, then I think we would be able to make a better decision. So that's what I would ask for, is that we get that in writing from you, and then we can consider it at a later date.
Something I need to remind everybody on is that we are voting on very specific language. We're not voting on general concepts. It's every last word in this motion of item 1 is what we're voting on. And I know that I'm seeing valid points on both sides of this argument. I mean, Sally and Anton say something, they're swaying me over to their side, then Mac is swaying me back onto their side. I would feel much, much more comfortable if this part of it was brought back with specific language that will address the concerns for both parties. Because if this is not really time sensitive, I don't believe, where it has to be done now, because the board itself is not even going to see this for another 2 or 3, well, that's the end of August until I get to present it to them. So would you consider bring this particular section back with specific language that addresses these concerns that you've heard here today?
Yeah, I would.
Anton?
I would like to propose an amendment to the motion. The amendment is that we include the 5-year capital budget as part of each master plan update, period. Right. That's my proposed amendment.
You need to say it slow enough so that we can write it down, please. Include the 5-year
capital budget as part of each master plan update.
Did you get that, Mac?
I did.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and repeat it, make sure that we're all hearing the same thing.
So Anton has proposed an amendment to the original motion to include this capital budget as a part of the annual master plan update.
Yeah.
It says include the 5-year capital budget.
Okay.
Remember, we're voting on words.
Is that part of the 3rd sentence?
Yes, yes, that would be added.
Okay. This amendment, we're voting on the amendment itself now, not the motion, but the amendment. Is that understood by everybody? Okay. Mac, why don't you have a roll call?
Okay. John Anderson,
Yes.
Ken Burns is absent, Maisha Cole is absent, Sally DeWitt,
Yes.
Lupe Anyana,
Yes.
Don Gosney,
Yes.
Lorraine Humes,
Yes.
Anton Junghair,
Yes.
and Mac Moore, yes.
Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7, 0, 0, 2. All right, we are now voting on the amended motion. Okay, which includes just item number 1. Mac, can you go ahead and do a roll call again, please?
Sure. John Anderson,
Yes.
Ken Burns is not here, Maisha Cole is not here, Sally DeWitt,
Yes.
Lupe Anyana,
Yes.
Don Gosney,
Yes.
Lorraine Humes,
Yes.
Anton Junghair,
Yes.
and Mac Moore, no. Okay, so the motion passes.
Motion passes 6, 1, 0, 2. All right, we're going to item number 2 on this. Starts with the Board of Education is not yet implemented. All right, do we have a motion to approve? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve it.
Okay.
I'll
Sally
second.
and Anton Junghair. Any discussion? All right, I'm having a problem with this, is saying we're telling the board that we have not yet implemented the update to the FMP, but they've been working on it now for 5 months and they're continuing to work on it. So kind of makes us look a little incompetent if we get up there and tell them, oh, by the way, this thing you've been working on for the past 5 months, we're telling you it's not done yet. I mean, they're working on it. I just cannot see getting up there before them and making this, telling them this. I cannot support this one. All right, I didn't see who put their hand up first, so I'm just gonna, Mac, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Don on this. I think that, one of our, we want to establish some credibility for our body, and that if we approve this motion, I think that really undercuts our credibility. The concept of an update to the facilities master plan, a comprehensive update, really only of the approval of Measure R, which occurred in March. And then since then, we are operating in the context where the district is managing a full-blown pandemic, and to say that perhaps technically they did, if as Melissa has indicated that they are targeting to finish the process by the first quarter of 2021. And work on it, in a diligent and I think a very thoughtful manner between now and then. I think that would, that really undercuts our credibility. I think that would seem like we're really nitpicking in the context of a very serious situation where there are much higher priorities for the district. So I'm really opposed to this. I think it really makes no sense.
Okay, we've got Anton, Sally, and then I've got a follow-up.
Well,
I move we table.
Bill Wynn.
To January 2021 meeting.
Okay, a motion to table is non-debatable. This is, do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second. John Anderson.
Okay, hang on, I'm taking notes. Give me a second, slow rider. All right, we have a motion to table until the January meeting of 2021. Okay. Mac, will you call the roll on that?
Sure. John Anderson,
Yes.
Ken Burns and Maisha Cole are absent. Sally DeWitt,
Yes.
Lupe Anyana,
Yes.
Don Gosney,
Yes.
Lorraine Humes,
Yes.
Anton Jungher,
Yes.
and Mac Moore, yes. So, the motion to table passes.
Motion passes 7-0-0-0. Oh, two. Sorry. Okay. The item, last part of this motion starts out 2020 Measure R bond ballot measure language. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second.
Anton Young, Sally, and then Anton. Any discussion on this? Anton, your hand is up.
I'm going to take it down.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Blue hands are popping up and down all over my screen. Okay, Anton, I'm sorry. Did you take yours down or keep it up? All right, Mac. You stayed up for the longest.
Yeah, thank you. So here, again, in our last meeting, we discussed this a bit, and I indicated that I felt that we should take a look at the ballot measure language, and then also the recommendation from the forensic accounting investigation, and so and express my opinion that I would like to hear from the auditor that's going to be reviewing the situation to see if this particular item was implemented, Moss Adams, which will be happening later on. But one thing that struck me and stuck with me, and I'm trying to think of a good solution to this, that we could address this. I think Sally's statements from last meeting indicated that she felt that the ballot measure language did not allow for oversight, and it got me to thinking that why is that? Would that be the case? I think that we have the ability to do oversight in the context of ensuring that the district is implementing the program consistent with the facilities master plan. And there's nothing that prevents us from do that. The ballot language certainly includes reference to the master plan. And so to me, I think we can provide effective oversight in respect to the master plan. And so I think trying to get to the intent of this, and say, we do have the tools to provide oversight to ensure that the district is in fact sticking to the plan. They're not spending money outside of the plan, so I offer that up as perhaps an alternative to this approach of saying, that we say that they didn't implement that measure. I think, I have a difference of opinion. I think that they did. And it's certainly my expectation that they're going to stick to the plan. We just got a presentation that showed that they are hewing to the plan very carefully. And so I seen that, since 2016 at least, that in fact they've been sticking to the plan. So if they didn't, I think we would take the opportunity to notify the public that they weren't sticking to the plan. And so I think that this is not necessary, and I would like to wait to hear until we have a professional third party to provide us some input in respect to whether or not this particular recommendation was implemented. Thank you.
All right, I'm next in line, and Sally, and then Anton. This item 3 is actually broken down into two parts. First saying 2020 Measure R bond ballot measure language cannot be used as the basis for effective bond oversight. That to me is a matter of opinion. While some people say it cannot be used, other people might say it can be used. I think we can get effective oversight with this language on here. The second part of it is the Board of Education has not yet effectively implemented the 2016 Forensic Accounting Investigation recommendation of TC 2-2. Okay, but what we're doing in here is, in this, we're telling the board that they failed on item TC 2-2. Okay, I can go along with that. We tell them you failed on it. But when you're dealing with the Measure R ballot language, we can't go back and change the ballot language. This is an argument that should have been made to the public at every doorhouse as they were getting ready to vote for it. It says we can't do this right with the ballot language that is on there. We can't change it. This is what it is. We have to live with this. And the money is going to be coming to us, to the school district, whether the ballot language is to your liking or not. All we can do is make best use of what we've been handed, and try to hold the districts, the staff's feet to the fire as much as possible to make sure that they just don't follow the language of the text, but the spirit of the text as well. But I said, I can't support this as it's written, because I believe that we can get effective bond oversight. And I don't think it does us a whole lot of good just to flat tell them that you failed on there. I can include that in the next chair report without any problem at all, without going through a motion on there. But Sally was next, and then Anton.
Well, I'll let Anton go first, and then I'll tie up anything if need be. I've actually said my piece, but go ahead, Anton.
Well, I agree with Mac in regards to the facility plan does provide a way for oversight. So I would like to propose the following amendment. The facility master plan does provide the CBOC a way to provide effective oversight. That's my amendment. That would be an addition.
Okay, say it again, please. F&P
Facilities master plan does provide the CBOC a way to provide effective oversight.
Still writing, hang on.
And just make sure I understand what you're saying, Anton. You want that to be the first sentence?
Yes, I think that's where it goes the best.
All right, I need a clarification here. Are you suggesting that you add this language to the first sentence? Well, it's all one sentence. I'm sorry, it's all one sentence.
Well, it'd be added in front of the first sentence. It'd be inserted in front of the first sentence.
The facility master plan provides a method to effectively oversee expenditure of 2020 Measure R bond revenue.
That's not the amendment.
I know, that's what I'm trying to clarify. What actually is he saying?
He says the FMP does provide the CBOC a way to provide effective oversight.
Of?
No, that's the words that were in his amendment.
Yeah, and again, it provides, I mean, for D and E also. So, I mean, it applies to all. So that's why I didn't want to refer it just to R.
Okay. A discussion on the amendment itself. I have a concern. It seems like this amendment contradicts the first part of item 3. It says that the FMP does provide a way for effective oversight, but then you're saying that the Measure R bond ballot measure language cannot be used as an effective bond oversight.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not. The way you're wording it, Anton, I'm afraid I can't support it, and maybe I'm not understanding.
Well, again, I'm open. We've not had a second yet. If you want to provide some clarification, I'm open to that.
All right, let's ask that question.
Second to the amendment? A second to the amendment?
No, we haven't, there's not been a second yet, so.
Right, that's what I'm asking. Let me be the chair for a minute. Well, I'm asking, do we have a second to the amendment?
Okay, I'm with you. Well, I'll second it. I'll second it. Okay.
Sally, amendment made by Anton, seconded by Sally.
I guess that doesn't make any sense, does it? No, I have to step back here because I'm confused.
Well, I'm open to friendly amendment. The point I'm making is the ballot language is what the CBOC is supposed to provide oversight on. And in my view, the ballot language does not provide a mechanism for us to provide effective oversight. But I think I agree with what Max says, that the facility master plan, when they put up a budget and it's approved by the board, we can then provide oversight whether the money was spent in accordance with the board approved facility master plan. So
Yeah.
I'm making a distinction between
Okay.
the facility master plan and the ballot language, and I'm agreeing with Mac.
And I would agree with you, except that it's not what this number 3 says. So as it is.
I need to ask this question again, Sally. Before Anton started talking again, you said you want to take a step back. Taking a step back was addressing your second. Are you still seconding, or are you?
No, I can't because I'm too confused.
You have withdrawn your second.
Yeah.
So I'm asking the question again. Do we have a second to Anton's motion? Do we have a second to Anton's motion? Hearing no second, the motion will not be considered. So we're back to the original motion to approve item number 3. Further discussion?
And I do have my hand up for a reason.
Okay, well, I never can tell if your hand is up fresh or if it's just been left up there.
I know, that's why I said it's there for a reason. Sorry, I get it, Don.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You got to see my screen with all the things popping up and down.
I know, I get it. You're doing the best you can, same here. Okay, so the ballot language as it is, there's 2,500 words in the ballot language. The facility master plan is not referenced at all in the ballot summary, which is 50 words or maybe 100 words at most. The thing that everybody looked at when they went into the voting booth and marked their ballot. No reference to the facility master plan at all in the summary. It was just like Measure D and E, very generalized. It's going to be used for safety, this, that, and the other thing. It's like saying, we're going to build a house, but we don't know how big the house is. We don't know how much money we're going to spend on it. We just know we're going to spend $575 million because that's what we're voting on, but we don't know if that's what the house is actually going to cost because there's no reference to the facility master plan until you get to the full text, and the full text is 2,500 words, of which no more than about 250 words reference the facility master plan. That means that over 2,000 words are generalized projects, again, safety, theaters, other projects. I mean, really, literally those words, other projects that were approved for Measure D and E. Those words were used in the text. That's very, very generalized, non-specific language. And as a group, I think we come forward, it's very important that we come forward to the board and say, this is not appropriate. We cannot oversee. You say you're going to build a house, but you don't tell us what you're going to spend it on and how much. We can't oversee that. And it's very important that we take that stand. And by the way, I did take that stand. I wrote the board. I wrote op-ed pieces. So I made my stand before the ballot was voted on.
I read your op-ed piece.
Yes, thank you. And I was, the board didn't like that. There were various members that didn't like me as a result of that. So I took my stand and I took my hits. Now it's time for this body to look at it and say, no, you didn't do it right. We need to know, when you want money from us, we want to know what you're going to spend it on. And they could have and should have, they had a really good facility master plan. They could have tied it directly to the facility master plan in their ballot language, but they didn't. And it's very, very important that we tell them that's not the right way to do it. They were told by VLS in the facility in the forensic accounting investigation that they needed to do it tied to the facility master plan. They were told by the Hoover Commission, and I think there's at least one more best path. Oh, it's a legislative. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's in the whereases. And the point is that there are a lot of places that say use your facility master plan, but they didn't do it. And we need to tell them that we think they need to do it. So that we need to say yes on that.
All right, I'm gonna have a comment, then Mac is next in line. Just a little bit of clarification, just as I've been telling you all that we are voting on the specific words in the motion itself. Not what we think it says, but the specific words. The same happened in March election when it was dealing with the ballot language there. And this is the part that should scare us all. You've actually got two summaries. You know, you've got the one that's only 2 or 3 sentences that is actually on the ballot itself. You know, approved $575 million plus. Then you've got the summary that, you know, you said 500 words. I didn't count them. But that is just a summary. You're not voting.
2,500.
Okay, but the people
I counted them.
Okay. The people are not counting. I mean, the people are not voting on the summary. They're voting on the 2,500 words of the actual ballot text.
Yeah.
Okay, which very, very few people ever read. Because most of the time it's written by attorneys that are making the words up as they go along. So it's, you know, we have to live with is not that 1 or 2 sentences that are on the ballot, not the 500 words that is the summary, but the actual ballot language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that little clarification, but I still stand by my objections that I can tell them that we've got a problem with this in my chair report, but you know, coming up with a motion to make a point of this, I'm not sure that that's necessary. You know, either to let them know that we cannot have effective bond oversight. Again, I disagree with it. I think that we can. And again, telling them that they failed on item TC 2-2. Okay. I think we'll add that to the list of the many other things that the public is telling them they failed on every meeting. Okay, but okay, Mac, you had your hand up next. Sally, do you still have your hand up?
Maybe. Depends on what Mac says.
All right, I'm sorry.
You mean I can't get in the last? I wanted to get in the last word, Sally. Why don't you?
Okay.
Right, hold on. I want to go back
the best I can here.
I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier and in the emails. We can't really have this back and forth and still get out of here at a reasonable time. So you make your statement and then kind of move on, please. Okay, but Mac.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't want to, sort of inject some of the political views into the discussion, but I think that, obviously I was on the other side. I was pro Measure R, served on the Measure R committee, and I just wanted to point out that this idea of following the master plan was a key part of the overall message to the voters. So and to me, the references to measure of the facilities master plan in the ballot language is very clear, and that was the intent, and ultimately that's what the voters they approved, and so that to me is an indication, whether it was vague or not, that they did want to improve the schools in our district and spend the money. So that I just wanted to provide that comment is that the facilities master plan was front and center in terms of the overall messaging for the campaign.
Thank you. Now, Mark Porter was waving at me like he wants to speak. Did I get that right, Mark? Can you unmute yourself and talk?
Left.
Mark, are you there? Or?
I think he might have waved by.
Okay, right. I thought he was waving me. I want to say something. Okay, all right then. let's go ahead and have ourselves a vote on this. Matt, can you have roll call, please?
Okay, John Anderson,
No.
Ken Burns and Maya Chacon not here. Sally DeWitt,
Yes.
Lupe Inyana,
Yes.
Don Gosney,
No.
Lorraine Humes,
Yes.
Anton Junghair,
Yes.
and Mac Moore, no. So let's see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses and 1, 2, 3 no's, so the motion passes.
The motion passes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, give me another couple of seconds to sort my papers here. You guys are all a lot more professional than I am. I'm sitting in my recliner. I got my laptop on my lap and all kinds of papers and stuff stuck all around me. Nothing is staying put.
Yeah, but you're in Alaska as far as I can see.
No, that's the Antarctic.
Oh.
I could put up the pictures of my penguin buddies and give you their names if you want, but okay. We've just finished item number P. Let's go on to item number Q, the annual report update. I'm sorry, it says Sally DeWitt and Don Gosney. Should be Sally DeWitt and Lorraine Humes. Okay, that's number 4. My apologies. Okay.
All right. Okay, so Lorraine, is it all right if I just jump in here?
Sure.
Okay, so we are working our way towards the completion of version 1 out of 3 versions for the annual report to 2019. And version 1 will be the first version presented to the CBOC and at the same time made public, even though it's not the final version of the 2019 report. It's still made public. And it will be presented, if all goes as planned, at the September meeting. So our committee, our subcommittee, the 3 of us, Lorraine and I and John Anderson, met and went over the status so far of version 1. And it's still in, it's still being worked on. It's a work in progress in all sections. And so we want to give a due date to those of you that are here. And the due date for version 1 draft is August 31, which is 3 weeks from today. And that will give our committee at least 1 week to prepare for the agenda for the August 14th meeting. And I might add that the one big item that did in the last month, since the last meeting up to now, is MAC made a proposal to our subcommittee regarding the use of the facility master plan to oversee Measure R funds as part of our compliance statement. And he spoke to Lorraine, I believe Lorraine, you could correct me if I'm wrong, and then also Anton, and they came to an agreement on that particular point. So I think it was a good process, and I guess I double checked because I wasn't involved in that. Mac, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a reasonably good process, yes?
Yeah, it's fine. It was pretty simple. I made the request and people said yes, so I'm happy.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. And so we have to, as a committee, as a little subcommittee, we have to be careful in who we speak to as, a total, so that we don't go over a quorum of the CBOC. And that was an example of how we dealt with that. So Lorraine dealt with Mac who also talked to Anton and so forth. And then at
It
the
was-
very
It was
last,
mostly by email. It wasn't physically.
okay. And then we're giving ourselves a week to prepare for the agenda so that we can resolve any issues that we think might have come up in the that may need to be resolved, and then we can put them into the agendized discussion version 1, and then when we get to the whole CBOC, then we can discuss those types of issues and resolve them as a part of the whole CBOC with all of us present. So that's kind of our opportunity to, as a complete group, resolve any issues that we might see come up in the annual report. I don't see any of those types of issues right now, especially since this thing with Mac, it seems to be resolved already. So, you know, we'll just kind of roll forward, and that's where we are. Lorraine, do we have anything else to say on this subject?
No, I think that's it. Just make sure if you have any trouble to let us know, because we haven't heard from the new people.
Yeah.
How they're doing.
Yeah, and actually we're going to contact, Maisha's not here, and we've kind of got her on the list in a couple of different places. Lupe, you are on the list. So can I just ask you here, or have you had a chance to look at it? Do you have any questions? Can we give you a call?
I've looked at it, but I think I'm gonna need a little bit more support on it, at least a conversation.
Okay,
This
okay,
will be my first time. I kind of
sure.
was there through the process last time you guys did it, but only through the approval
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not
yeah.
the actual process. So
Mhm.
I will reach out to you, Sally, and maybe Dawn.
Okay, okay. Yeah, maybe we could just set up a meeting. That sometimes helps. So if you're available between now and the end of the week, we don't have to say it right now, yes or no, but I'll just make that proposal that we try to meet within a week. So you have enough time to do what needs to be done in 3 weeks. And I think that's it.
Okay, early on you mentioned a meeting of August 14th. What
No,
is that
September
meeting?
14th. Oh, I may have misspoken. I'm sorry. Well, I have on my calendar that the CBOC is supposed to meet on September 14th.
Yeah, but you said August 14th. That's just,
Okay, I misspoke.
just
I'm
Friday.
sorry.
That's why so what are you talking about?
Right. No. The meeting, we're version 1, we're going to discuss on the meeting in September on the 14th. And so then we have to have that agendized and so forth. And so the due date for drafting version 1 on Google Docs is August 31. Okay. I was careful in how I spoke there. Any questions?
Yeah. Right. One of the first rules of being a despot leader of a third world country is you never leave the country, because that's when the coup takes place. So I want to make sure if I didn't go someplace on Friday, I come back and find out I'm no longer on the CBOC.
Okay.
You guys held a secret meeting and yeah, you just slipped out there. Okay. Do we have any questions or comments on the update? I have one, and it's a minor one because I brought it up the last time. Please, 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 when you type this stuff up, I can't even show it on you. Keep in mind, you got people that actually print these pages out, especially about half of the people that you're talking to are old people. I don't mean just seniors like us, but old people. They can't see. So you got to use a font that is bigger than 1.5 font. Make it so that when it prints out, it is legible. Almost all the text in the grayed out area is just super small. It needs a magnifying glass for some of us. So please help me out on that. Even if you got to go to a second page by going to the larger font, appreciate it.
Okay, then I think you're talking about the to-do list itself.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay, got it.
It's the only thing we have on the agenda.
Right. Yeah. I just want to double check.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll go ahead and move on to item R. We got the audit schedules, and Anton volunteered to help work with the auditors to try and staff, I should say, to to nail down some dates on here. And I want to thank Anton, not just for this, but Anton helps me an awful lot with the agenda packet to feed me information and to correct me when I screw up, which is a lot. So I thank Anton for that. But Anton, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you to let you talk about it for a second or two.
I think the important thing on this is it should be marked proposed, because this is not an agreed upon schedule. Margarita Romo and I did talk, as I was directed to talk with her after the last meeting. We agreed that we should run the finance audit consistent or concurrent with the performance audit on the same dates. So as a result of that discussion, I put these dates in based on our CBOC meeting schedule and the board meeting schedule in March of next year. But this has not been agreed to by the district. So I think for the purpose of the minutes, it should be marked proposed, not agreed to by district at this point.
Good point on that, because since we don't even have a performance auditor yet, kind of hard to nail them down on dates. They can't agree when they're not even here yet. Okay, do we have any questions or comments on this? Okay, thank you again, Anton. Let me flip pages here. All right, item number S. This is page 113 of your agenda packet. Rather hefty little section of here, but I'm going to turn this. This is financial improvement recommendations, bond construction program. Anton, the floor is yours.
I got inspired to write this report after the last facilities committee meeting, where it was asserted that we didn't have the staff or the money to do the performance audits that the CBOC has recommended, the effectiveness and results audit and the follow-up of the forensic investigation audits that have not been done. I think what was most striking to me, there's 107 audit recommendations that have not been fully implemented and verified by an independent third party. Some of these are over 4 years ago. I think that is striking in terms of lack of performance by the school district in terms of both the investigation recommendations and the last performance audit recommendations. I was particularly troubled when they argued that they couldn't do the comprehensive audits because it would be a burden on the general fund. And in fact, I researched that, and it's in the packet where the Attorney General opinion clearly says that it can be used, bond funds can be used to pay for these audits, and FSMAC concurred in that opinion. So the recommendation basically has to do with the funding of the audits, because the CBOC has already made recommendations in terms of the performance audit scope. So I didn't repeat that recommendation because that's already on the books, where we recommended a full effectiveness and results audit and not just the compliance audit, which deals with whether you spent the money on the projects and not for salaries. So I would like to move the recommendation, which is presented on page 116, that the district charge the cost of Prop 39 school bond financial audits and compliance and effectiveness results performance audits to the building fund, Fund 21, to reduce the burden on the general fund. And further, that the CBO chairperson prepare and issue press releases, opinion editorials, social media comments, and letters to the editor to inform the public of the facts in this report. That's my motion.
I'm going to break protocol and second that motion. Chair is supposed to stay out of that kind of stuff, but hell, I'm going to Brown Act prison already for some things, so might as well in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a pound. But go ahead and let Lorraine speak, and then I'm going to speak, and then we'll take others.
Yeah.
Mac,
I wanted a clarification because your supporting documents mentioned that the performance audit and the financial audits could be paid for by the Fund 21. It didn't mention anything about the FAI, and I was wondering how do you reconcile putting that in with those?
Well, if you'll note on page 115, on footnote 4, where the has the funding for the forensic investigation.
Yeah.
218,000 was paid by the general fund, and 852,000 was paid by the bond funds. So most of that
Yeah.
was paid by the bond funds.
Yep. But I mean,
so the precedent is already there.
So you're going by precedent, not by the documentation that you got.
Well, I mean, they paid 852,000 out of bond funds for the forensic investigation.
Yeah.
If I can interrupt for just a second, we have a letter that is in our minutes from the district's bond counsel explaining about that. That's not that long ago, but what we can do is we can research it and pull it out. So it's not just the background information that he's provided here, but it's also from the district's own bond counsel, although it was difficult to understand.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. All right. I was shocked to see the proposal on the RFQP. Anton included I included the comments in chair report. Anton reported or made comments as well. But I mean, I just said this is bare bones, and he didn't even provide the bones. Might as well have gone to Walmart, just ordered up Walmart.com and ordered up a performance audit off of their shelf, where you insert name here, insert numbers here. There's no there. I said it was very disturbing to see just how insignificant this proposal was, and then to hear the Ms. Romo say, "Well, we don't have the staff and we don't have the money." Well, they may not have the staff and they may not have the money that they want, but they need to find the staff. They need to find the money, because this is too much. This is not a $30,000 bond measure where if they buy an extra something or the other for $2, that it's going to bankrupt us. This is essentially, we got the neighborhood of $700 million that we're playing around with here, and the public demands, the public deserves to have an accounting of this. They need oversight of it, and that means it's got to be included in the proposal. I was very upset with it. The scope of the last proposal was narrowed down so drastically that I was not even allowed as chair to speak to the performance auditor to see if we could schedule a phone conversation. They had to get permission from the district to accept my phone call. Now that is getting pretty chintzy on there, and we can't afford that. We don't need to go as bad as we were 10 years ago when we were spending $325,000, $340,000 for the performance audit. Anton, what did they say? We spent about $86,000, $89,000 for this last one. Anyway, go ahead. Was I right on that?
75.
75, okay, it's even less. But the only concern that I have on this is that the legal opinion from the state attorney general was from 2004. And it probably is still valid, but I do not want to rely upon the district to go to their bond counsel and give them up the recommendation, because Anton, you were around at the time, or many of you were not. 16 CBOC meetings in a row, 16. We had staff mislead us on where the money could come from these. And then all of a sudden, they came up with legal opinion that validated some of what we said. Our ability to trust them was shot to hell at that point, if we had any trust to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information that Anton has provided and forward it to our independent legal counsel, Adam Ferber, and ask him for a legal opinion as well. The district won't like it because this one won't be a cheap one. It'll probably cost them maybe $750, even $1,000. But this is a critical thing. Our new associate superintendent over business affairs advised the facility committee that if they want something more than the bare bones, that they need to bring it back to the full board and get the board to tell him that we want a full performance audit. And that's where we're gonna have to rely upon each of us, the citizens out there watching in right now, going on social media, knocking on doors, whatever it takes. They'd be able to reach out to the board to tell them this is what we want, okay? Because it's not a done deal yet, but if we just sit back, it will be. All right, next person is Mac, and Lorraine, you got your hand up again, or is it still up?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Mac and then Lorraine. Mac, unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I support this very strongly. And so I guess what I want to understand a little bit is more about the mechanics. And you started to go into that, Don, a little bit, but does the board have to approve this contract, or would they have to sort of independently intervene in the process in order to change the course?
I'm not an expert. Obviously, I wish Tony were here to respond to this, but I believe that Tony's request has to go before the board for the RFQ and P. Okay, and that's where the board can step in and say, no, we want something more than the Walmart.com version.
Right. And then, so we have at least some time to muster, public opinion in favor of this item. But it sounds like we probably have to move pretty quickly.
I would say we have to move quickly, in that they expected to have somebody on board by October, and you got to give the process a little bit of time to work. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the board does not meet again until August 26th. And let's assume that it's going to be on their agenda at that point. But even if it's not, we can make our play. We can start lobbying them. We can speak under public comment. I've got another 5 minutes to give the chair report, and I can devote most of it to this. Plus the other things we just voted on. All right, Lorraine, you had your hand up, and then Anton.
Yes. Just for another I have 2 points. One for another clarification is that this year their budget is very tight. Are we putting this recommendation that we will in the future also pay for these from from the Fund 21?
Well, I'm sorry. This next performance audit is the future. That's the one.
Well, I mean, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024.
A lot of times they will sign like a 3-year deal with these auditors.
Okay.
And I don't want to put words in their mouth. Who knows what they're going to do? But it would apply to this very, very next one.
Okay. So it's not for ad an item, not continually for the next 30 years.
Well, it doesn't say the next 30 years because everything's going to change. But if they go with a 3-year contract, it would be for 3 years. I would think.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And another thing is, I was just wondering, if we're paying for the audits, could we possibly have a seat in deciding who gets the audits?
Now, it's funny that you should even mention that, because that is one of the things that we tried to insert into the board policy. And it was, no, we've never done that before. But Anton, you'll recall, we did that before. And I was the person that did it. And I got to say, I ran the show on that, because the staff people weren't as familiar with what we needed, and they relied upon my advice and input to help drive it. And we dropped it from a $340,000 performance audit down to a $100,000 performance audit, based on my recommendations. So we don't need this, this, and this, but we do need these things. And I thought it was relatively effective. we don't, if we have somebody sitting at the table, we're not making the decisions, because guess what? The board makes the decision. All we're doing is providing input, asking questions as a collaborative effort. As we keep using that word a lot, until it means giving up actually a little bit of control, and that's where we've run into a problem with staff. So I don't know whether we could get a seat at the table. I just don't know.
Okay, that's all.
Anton?
I wanted to speak to Mac's question about the mechanics. Firstly, RFQs typically are not approved by the board. These go out on a routine basis from the purchasing department. They never, they approve the contract when it comes back, but they do not normally approve the request for the contract. So this is a very unusual situation. This was on the last facilities committee meeting where, as Don indicated, he and I both spoke to it, and the committee at the facility committee meeting recommended that we go with a full audit as recommended by the CBOC. At the end of that meeting, the associate superintendent chimed in and said, well, we're going to take this to the board because I want the board to decide. So in effect, he did not want to take direction from the committee with the hope that he could get 3 votes of the board to not support this. So I think that's where we are now.
You're right. And part of what Anton put together was the transcript that we paid for of that discussion from the facilities meeting. So you don't have to just take Anton's word or my word for it. Yeah, this was the transcript. I've got the tape and the video. So, okay. Sally, your hand is up. Anton, you want to take your hand down? Sally?
Okay, I just want to ask a question about the second half of this recommended motion. Has that already been discussed? I had to step away there for just a second.
Yeah.
It's to do with prepare and issue press releases, opinion editorials, etc. Did you already discuss that?
No, we have not.
Oh, okay. So I just have a question about that.
Good.
What does that, to inform the public of the facts of these reports, that being the audits and the compliance reports and so forth. So I'm not sure how, I mean, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of this, and I'm also wholeheartedly in favor of more press releases and so forth going out to the general public. I'm just trying to tie those two things together. Can somebody speak to that?
I'm going to speak to it just a little bit now. I've already put together a preliminary plan, assuming that this was going to pass. And first stand is I'm going to go out to the street corners at both ends of my block and just shout at the crowds, and hopefully somebody will listen. Maybe some do, some don't.
Okay.
The reality is, when it comes to press releases, we don't have any press left. The Chronicle doesn't care about this. They want scandals. They want $48 million budget deficits, those kinds of things. Teachers discovered being pedophiles. Those are the kinds they want press releases on. They don't want press releases about something like this. Doesn't mean we can't send them, but I'm not sure you're going to get the result that you want. Because for all intents and purposes, we've got the San Francisco Chronicle, we've got the Bay Area News Group out of San Jose. Okay, they got to do it, and they change hands so frequently with their reporters. Every time they hire a new one, they've got to use Google Maps to find out where West County even is. Again, it doesn't mean we can't send something out. We do have social media, though. Outside of Richmond, I don't believe you have as robust a social media presence as we do here in Richmond. We've got about half a dozen sites that people are reading all the time. And some of them can be very addictive. Just a thing with Kennedy High School. I put it up there on Friday or Saturday, and I had over 150 comments on it. Okay, people are interested about it. So we can take advantage of that. We can use the next door as much as possible. But this will mean, I mean, I've got my own next door, which is Greater Richmond, but it doesn't carry where you're at, Sally, or where you're at, Mac, or where you're at, Anton. So if you've got next doors there, you can just copy and paste what I put together, for instance. or create your own, something like that. And of course, making reports at the board meetings is something that we can do. Not only at the CBOC report, but each individual, you can call in under public comment and talk about it. You may only be given 1 minute, but 1 minute here, 1 minute there. Next thing you know, people are listening on that. So there's a lot of different avenues. And I'm only one person. I can only hit up so many street corners to yell at passing cars. So each of you have to take your own city and do that. But that's largely what we're talking about on there. Also, as far as op-ed pieces, I am shocked, Sally, that the Times printed yours. I mean, nothing wrong with what you wrote. It's just, how did you get on their radar? That kind of thing. Good for you on that. But typically they restrict you to 175 words. My grocery list is 4 times that. And I'm a bachelor, so I mean, it's 175 words is not very much, and hardly anybody reads those anymore. It doesn't mean we can't try. You don't try, you don't get. Just me as the chair doing all this. It means all of you get to do it too. It means all of you have to take responsibility for some of that too. Okay? I hope that answers the question to a large extent.
Does. Yep.
Okay. Anton and then Leslie and then John.
I would assert this is a scandal. When you spend $1 million and do not implement 107 of the recommendations in over 4 years, that is a scandal, sir.
Out of 112.
I could label it as a scandal. I'm not quite sure that anybody's going to buy it as a scandal. It doesn't have really the sex appeal as a. Maybe I can get a white Bronco and go on the freeway and get the helicopters overhead like an OJ thing, but I don't think a whole lot of people. So anyway, John, you're next.
I was just going to add to your comment about Sally's op-ed. Dan Borstein over there is a big on bond issues. He thinks that they're deceitful in the way they're worded and all of that stuff. So I'm not surprised that her piece was printed. The other thing here, and I'll have to have an offline conversation with you, Don, and possibly Anton, those that go back. There was a grand jury report that was written back in, was it 2016, 2017? And how was the board done relative to those recommendations? And if they haven't followed those, or if they said they were going to follow them and didn't follow them, there's a way to address that.
Yeah, I know that on that grand jury report, I remember that the district filed their comments on it, and some members of the CBOC filed comments, members of the public filed comments, in both directions. I found a lot of holes in it personally, and I filed 46 pages of comments on it. And when you go online, though, all you see is the grand jury report. You don't see all the comments or whether they.
What you do is, and that's what I haven't gone back and looked at, the next year. In other words, let's say that was written in 16. The 17 jury puts together what they call a compliance report, and that's where the entity that in this case it would be the school district, it compiles their responses. And some of them, either they have 4, they won't they won't do it, they will do it, and then the ones that are never really followed up on are the ones that say, we will do this by a date of 1 year. And there is a mechanism to follow up on that, and particularly this year. So we can talk about that offline.
It's good information to know. I did not know that. So your expertise is already paid off. Good job. Thanks, John. Okay, any other thoughts or comments on this?
Yeah, I'll just say that the op-ed got published because I wrote an email to my own list, which is sort of like, Don, you putting out on social media, and I'm sure you have your own list too that you send to your emails to and so on. And then I was contacted.
Okay.
And to expand upon it, and I did talk to Dan Borstein, and yeah, and he kind of he didn't he just gave me feedback. I'd send a draft and he'd say, well, yeah, but that's too long, or say stuff like that. So I went through a couple of drafts and then he took it.
Yeah, Dan Bornstein is not real fond of our school district or anybody in West County for that matter. I mean, if he got wind that somebody had taken a second bottle of water out of the fridge here, he'd write an op-ed piece excoriating the district on it, saying that we're all crooked. Yeah.
I don't know about that part. He seemed reasonable to me.
I've had a lot of experience with him for 30 plus years. Anyway, glad you like him. Everybody has to have somebody mourn at his funeral.
We all have a different experience, that's all.
Okay, John, your hand is still up. You got more comment? John? All right, okay. Mac, why don't you go ahead and have a roll call, please, on the motion.
Okie dokie. Okay, John Anderson?
I'm going to think John is here on his computer, but not on his phone. And I say that because of a prior meeting where he was not able to do audio on his computer. So he may video cut off.
It probably doesn't matter. I'll say absent. Sorry. And then Ken Burns and Maisha Cole are absent. Sally DeWitt?
That would be a yes.
Lupe Anyana?
Yes.
Don Gosney?
Yes.
Lorraine Humes?
Yes.
Anton Jungher?
Yes.
Mac Moore is yes. And then, John, are you back or able to signal us in some fashion? It doesn't matter. The motion passes.
Okay, motion passes 6-0-0-3. Thank you, Anton, for bringing it up. We're finishing up this meeting. Actually, ahead of schedule. Item T, website update. This is just a quick update. We want to go over the entire site. I promised the board that we were going to be doing this. The idea is to assign, finding volunteers that are willing to take on just a specific task. Let's say, for instance, reviewing the minutes. We'll put them in a spreadsheet, review the minutes, just to make sure that they're there for each meeting, to make sure that they're the final for each meeting and not a draft, so we can go back. Somebody will take on the agenda packets. Are they all there? Are they live? Are the hot links hot? Now, we've discovered just this past year quite a few that were not, and I thank Lorraine on that. But we've got a number of items on there that just to find out what our status is. And so what I'll do is offline, I will approach each of you. This is another one of those things where I expect you to respond. I'll come up with a list of items. I'll give you a basic idea of, I think, what we need to look for. And then you just volunteer saying, that sounds like something I want to spend all my days and nights on. And then we'll come up with a target date to get it done, so that when the next time we meet, I can actually give a report, say, here's where we are at. But at the same time, I need each of you to be thinking about what else should we have on there? What can we add? Or to the same extent, when you look at the website, you ask this question, why is this here? Okay, if we all agree it doesn't belong there, maybe we ought to get rid of it. We need to follow that old axiom, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah, make it so it provides the information that the public wants, not that the staff wants, not even what we want, what the public wants. Okay, but we don't want to just flood it with information that nobody cares about. Sorry. Oh, sorry. So you use of the acronym KISS. That goes back to what we're talking about on getting information out to the public. We have a tremendous amount of information that we might actually pour through, but the public is not going to pour through a 100-page annual report, for instance. So we've got to summarize this kind of stuff to give them the general idea about what is going on. And if they like what they're reading, they might go to the longer version of it. But you can't have things like I typically write and that are 12-page grocery list. The grocers aren't going to read it. So do we have any thoughts or comments on the website update at this point? Or you want to wait to see those emails that I send you?
I have a thought.
Go ahead.
As far as I've gone through this exercise in the past. We don't even have the performance audits, financial audits up for last year. Its website is not useful. I'm not willing to spend this effort unless we get the opportunity to update the site, because all we're going to do is spend a lot of time. I don't see the district having the interest or the staffing to make the changes. I think my sense is we ought to, before we spend all the effort, what needs to be updated, get approval from the district to allow us to do the updating. That's my view. I'm not willing to spend any more time on this effort unless we have that ability to make it happen.
I will ask them again. Okay, but in the past, I'm going to say 6 months, the staff has been done quite a bit to update things on their own, because they're not looking at it through the same set of eyes that we are. But they have been working on it, and when we've told them, like when Lorraine told me about the series of agenda packets that were the wrong ones, I let them know about it, and they took care of it within a day. So, I mean, what you talk about, I agree with, that they have not been as cooperative as we would like them to be, but they haven't been as uncooperative as they used to be. So we got a little bit of mixture there. But I'll ask staff about this in my normal sweet tone way, and but at the same time, gathering this information, I mean, it's not going to change unless we bring it to their attention to change. Okay. Any other comments real quick? Okay, thank you again on that. On the calendar is what it is, showing our next meeting of September 14th. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to mention. I'm gonna wait for us to stop the meeting and I remember what the other item was. On future agenda topics, now this one is an important one because let us assume that the proposed joint meeting will be held on Wednesday, September 30th. I still need a confirmation from all of you, and I need confirmation from the district on there. But it means that I will have to sit down with the President Hernandez Jarvis and Clerk Laura, along with staff, to come up with the agenda topics to be discussed for that joint meeting. So right now, let me just put it out there. I mean, what agenda topics do you want to see discussed at the joint meeting? All right, Anton, your hand is up.
Amendments to the board policy and the scope for the FY 2020 performance audit.
Okay. Anybody have anything else that they can think of? I mean, I've got a handful of things myself that I'll throw in there. My history with staff on there, they just won't accept a long laundry list of items. They want to keep it down to like 3 items. Right now, I've only seen 2 being proposed here, so I don't think we're going to have that kind of a problem. The last time we actually met, I believe I was able to convince them went with like 7. But we really, and that included the, this March of last year. We went with 7 items on there. That also included hearing proposals from the performance and financial auditors. And we were very pressed for time, but they were gracious with them. I'm not dealing with the same kind of chair that I used to in the past. So I think that President Stephanie Hernandez-Jarvis will be more accommodating, as was President Panis. But we'll see what we can come up with before that meeting that will encompass our better needs. They're more important to us. Okay, on our next meeting for September 14th, do we have any future agenda items you want to propose for right now? Hearing none?
We already have the annual report, right? So
Yeah, well, that's
already, okay.
already etched in stone on my agenda down there.
Okay.
Okay, if I'm not hearing anything else, it is 3:42 p.m. We are adjourned.
Hey, Don.
I can go back and tell Maisha, yeah, you complained about the length of our last meeting. We shortened it up just for you, and you didn't bother to attend. Oh, well. All right. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night
You
now.
too.